Well, hello, everybody, and happy Sunday, and welcome to the 131st episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today we have another amazing guest, somebody I've previously served with in the United States Navy, Dave Snell. How are you doing today?
Doing wonderful. It's another fine day.
Another fine Navy day, as we would say
I
back.
didn't say that.
I know, but I know it was probably like on the tip of your tongue. At least it was on mine.
No.
No. So today we're going to be talking about a variety of subjects. We're going to be talking about service, as we always do on the Stories of Service podcast, but we're also going to be talking about mental health from somebody who has had their share of demons and things that they have struggled with. And we are going to share his story in the hopes that it will help you and inspire you to maybe share your story. Dave has created a holistic environment around him, and it's based on the hard work that he's done that I feel we all must do when we're suffering greatly. He is a retired Navy cryptologist who spent the majority of his career focused on the Pacific theater, but enjoyed deployments to the European theater, as well as multiple deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Philippines. Relatively early in his career, he began dealing with depression and anxiety, and it got so bad that he saw suicide as the only option. He did not talk about the subject with many of his peers for fear of stigma and lack of opportunities presented to him in his career. He was able to continue that career with a second tour at the National Security Agency, followed by the U.S. Pacific Fleet and Special Operations Command Pacific. And that is actually where I met him, where he was able to deploy to Afghanistan theater and a deployment to Joint Special Operations Task Force Philippines. After his naval career, he went into the industry conducting risk management assessments of Fortune 500 companies' cybersecurity programs to ensure they had met different regulatory requirements, but the trauma, it still persisted. And it began adding up and eventually found himself in therapy again and again and again. And then when the pandemic offered this period of extreme self-reflection, he found a means of getting behind his traumas and associated depression and anxiety. For Dave, he found that movement, mind, and meditation and meaning were the four areas he was able to integrate to ensure he kept the depression and anxiety at bay. Having lost weight during the pandemic, he focused a near 30-year goal of running in the Marine Corps Marathon and eventually in 2002 and in 2023. And they were the culmination of working through the 4Ms, as we discussed, and putting them into action when things during the races didn't go to plan. And yet, he was able to make it through both and looks forward to doing more in the coming years. Today, he's a security consultant using that experience in cybersecurity, intelligence, and private investigations to help companies protect their critical information and infrastructure from internal and external threats. And he's continued his service, sharing his story on podcasts like my own, his process, and helping others who are suffering with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Thank you again, Dave.
Hey, it's a great pleasure to be here, as we've talked about doing this before. And I think I'm finally at a point where it's a good time to do it.
Well, I'm excited to have you and dive right into it. So first off, as I always ask my guests who have served in the military, which the majority of them have, where were you born and raised, and what was some of the dynamics in your early childhood?
So I was born in Naples, Italy, in the Naval Hospital there. My dad was stationed on a ship at the time, an old destroyer escort of all things, what we call the frigates today. But dynamic was really strange. I mean, he's the reason I joined the Navy. He transferred from surface warfare to cryptology and was a Russian linguist for many, many years in the Navy. And we had tours in Scotland and Spain, and watching him, or not even knowing what it was he did as a cryptologist on submarines, really drove me to want to be a cryptologist. In the spy world and espionage was really interesting at the time. And to be quite honest, and I'm not going to start here, I don't want to bash, but my real mother, his first wife, manic depressive, bipolar, wouldn't get the treatment she wanted, very abusive relationship that we dealt with. And I just, those little T traumas, I call them, build up. We don't, we have these things that happen to us. I call them little T or big T traumas. And the little T traumas can compound on themselves to be as impactful as a single incident of trauma.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So getting a little ahead of myself anyway. So I joined the Navy after going to Georgia Tech, who I know a couple of your regular listeners, watchers also went to. and I got into the Navy, and I went surface warfare first, just like my dad. He went to Georgia Tech actually as well. Um, and I think there's a reason for my following him, and I'm bringing that up on
That's what I was
purpose.
gonna
Is
ask you is what
yeah.
was what that you were doing, that you were just kept following everything he was doing?
Well,
Why
I think I saw his journey as an escape from my mother. So if it worked for him, it would work for me. And the problem is it didn't really work for him. um, it, anyway, we got along. I went into the surface warfare community, and then I lateral transferred to cryptology twice. Actually, I'm one of the few people who's ever lateraled into cryptology, if ever anybody else declined it, and then be reselected to go back to cryptology. So, I mentioned in my biography, you said there, I had a suicide attempt. I had my second tour at the National Security Agency. That was during that time as my second time as a SWO that I attempted suicide.
what was the cause of that? Like, what was leading up to that?
That was a mix of things with a bad boss. And I'd like to talk, we'll get into it later, I hope, of the culture in the United States Navy in particular that I can speak to that drives us to these conditions. I had a CEO who he had it out for me very early, and my tour as a department head. And as I went along, I was trying to go home and I'd want to relax at home. But my wife at the time, my first wife, there was no relief. She was on me just like my mother was. There was
Mhm.
no escape valve. And I just saw this one escape as being, I'm gonna end my life.
Do you think that
Um,
you intentionally sought out somebody with your first wife that matched a lot of the same characteristics as your mother?
I was just thinking we're jumping right into this.
I mean, if I'm going too
No, no,
personal
no.
too deep,
I,
I
I think it's brilliant, actually. Yeah, I did.
Mhm,
I sought out because I hadn't identified really what was going on inside. I knew that there was depression. I knew that there was anxiety, but I wasn't willing or able to identify the root causes
mhm.
or the sources of that depression. And I escaped to it with alcohol, working hard, um, really just a lot of alcohol was a big driver. I'd come home and I'd have 2 or 3, 4, 5, however many it took to fall asleep that night. Generally, most every night after work. Weekends was coming from the military in the '90s. Transitioning from Cold War to post 9/11, where alcohol was still a big piece of our life in the military. It was really a big thing for me, and I'd
Right.
watch my dad escape with it as well. And I have a much better relationship with alcohol today. So
Well, that's good. It's definitely a numbing mechanism, and in the moment, it really does help to alleviate some of the stress. But the problem is that then it becomes habitual. You feel like shit the next day. It just there's so many bad things that come from it if you abuse it, and
it's a quick fix for a lot, but with long-term problems that are associated with physiologically, mentally,
Mhm.
that just aren't worth it in the long term.
Right. So after that, first, suicide attempt, did you get treatment and therapy or any kind of services?
Yes, I was put on limited duty. I was in Yokosuka, Japan at the time, actually, when that happened. Put on limited duty for 9 months. At the time, they were doing it at 9 month blocks, I think. I think it was 9 months. And we started to get to the root of the problem, trying to get there. And we said, okay, your mother's an issue. Okay, who doesn't have mother issues? Okay, or
Right.
parent issues.
Sure.
And it got to the point where here's one of the problems that I have with military medicine and the mental health arena. At least, again, as we talked about pre-show, I've been retired now for almost 9 years. And
Mhm.
I can't see that it's changed too much, but it's okay, he's down. Let's get him fit to fight. Okay, we're going to check that block. He's fit for sea duty or fit for duty, whatever it is. Put him back out in the fleet, and then they have another episode. And we just do this wave. So
Mhm.
after 9 months, I was brought back to sea duty or back to full duty, but not sea duty. And that's what prompted my lateral transfer back to cryptology.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
So I got the help a little bit. And then I went back and actually I went to the National Security Agency and I deployed for a year to Afghanistan, Qatar, and Iraq. I was in the special operations community with JSOC for a while, supporting them from all around the world. I turned into a high achiever to kind of counteract this negativity that I saw as the suicide attempt, and there was no lessons learned from it really at the time. And that was just a matter of how I chose to approach the problem, and that may rightly or wrongly. From there, it was really, how do I approach this again? Well, for every high there is in life, there's going to be a drop, and how precipitous that drop is up to us. And in a couple of cases, I had highs, and then I came down a bit, and I was like, I need to go back to therapy. I need to, just kind of this roller coaster trip that I was on. So after Yokosuka, I went to therapy at the National Security Agency. I packed fleet. I stopped at SOCPAC, but when I got back here to Virginia Beach in my last tour, I was back in therapy again.
Did you have hard times finding, because I struggle with this too in the military, when I would seek different therapists, I really didn't have the kind of therapy that I needed. It's really hard sometimes to find just that right person that you feel safe talking to, and that will push you to that next level and hold you accountable, won't just give you a drug. Because I don't feel, although I know drugs are helpful for some people, I don't think that they really solve the crucial inner healing and inner work that has to happen as you process what has happened to you and make sense of it. Did you
I
feel
think you're
like you
absolutely
weren't
right.
getting that? Okay.
Yeah, I did have trouble with that. I had one therapist while I was in the service. She was actually a civilian. The military ones, I just didn't find made the connection. I had one call me out, a male doctor. I refuse to see male psychologists. I just can't do it. This one guy looked at me and said, "You should never have a TV in your room. You should never do this. You should never do that." I just remember the TV in particular, but he just kept dragging in, like, these are what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't live like this. You shouldn't be drinking. I was like, we're not helping here. He was just very,
Right.
I don't know if he was trying to bow up on me and be more masculine than me, but I
Yeah.
looked at it and I said, we're done.
Yeah,
It
and those are
wasn't,
just, like, not healthy. I'm sorry, I was just saying those
oh,
just
no,
aren't
no.
really healthy ways to handle the issue at all.
Yeah, it was a bad situation. So 2019, the end of May, a friend of mine recommended a therapist here locally, and I said, okay, I'll try her out. I need some help here. And she looked at me and said, quit lying to me. What do you mean quit lying to you? She goes, you're not getting down to the root. You're just giving me the treetop level. I want to get down to the roots of the problem. You're just giving me the top layer. You're telling me what you think I want to hear. No, and she looked at me flat out and said, Dave, we are going to work a miracle and get you healthy. Wow. Okay. That took me aback. So what are we going to do? And thankfully for her part, she didn't believe in medicine as the right answer. We tried EMDR, the eye movement disassociation and reprogramming. I always mix up the D and the R.
I know. I was trying to say it too sometimes, and I just say EMD, eye movement desensitization rapid.
There you go.
I don't know.
Yeah, reprogramming, I think, is the R, but
Yeah.
the D acronym there gets me there. But we tried that for a while, and I just could not get beyond, as we were mentioning in the pre-show, I compartmented so many things because I was in special access programs in the STO world, that every little program had its own little compartment. And she said, well, in your brain, you're doing the same thing, and we're just never going to get beyond a few doors in. And you just set up this labyrinth of doors and rooms that we just can't get to. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, that led us to two things that we did simultaneously. The vagus nerve reset, which is the placement of little magnet, little square, boxes placed on your head, your collarbone, and right at your ribs. And there's reasons for this. The vagus nerve being the largest nerve in your body. That touches everything that, that the stomach feeling you get when you come on a show or you have to give a speech and the nerves get
Mhm.
fight, flight, or freeze. That's
Mhm.
your vagus nerve. And when we go into depression or trauma, really, I should say, we're realizing traumatic responses, it's the vagus nerve that is just in such a steady state of tension, of fight or flight. It doesn't know what to do. And I brought up earlier, I know I'm going a little bit off, a couple of places here, but those little t traumas that accumulate, our body just doesn't know what to do, and we get tense and we're afraid, and we think every little thing that's at us puts us into this fight or flight, and we never really recover and relax. Okay, I can go to a massage and I relax for an hour, but within 15 minutes I'm back to tight. Not physically, metaphorically, with the body just going, there's a trauma coming. I don't know what's going to attack me next.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So she pointed out that I'd been in this state for so many years, decades, 3 decades or more. At that point, really, all right, 4 decades. I won't say my age here, but we'd try this vagus nerve reset. So it was about 15 or 20 minutes of having these things on. And the clavicle, your collarbone is the nearest that it comes to the surface, and your rib cage is the closest that it comes. So that's why you put them where we did, along with your brain. So we tried that.
So they're magnets that they put on those different parts, and then
Yep.
do they just hold them there for a little while, or how does
Yeah,
it
they put a little felt covering over you so that they
Mhm.
stick there
And then
with
how
Velcro.
long do you wear them?
About 15 or 20 minutes,
Mhm.
um, depending on how bad you are, I guess. This is how long it worked for me. And we did that at the same time we do that for 15, 20 minutes. And then we would do something called the neurostimulation, which I liken to when you go to physical therapy and they do an e-stim on your muscles and they electrically shock you a little bit, right? Well, they did
Mhm.
that in a couple of spots behind my ear, and then I can't remember if it was like this or like this, but she would put them on my head too. And so the brain works on several brain waves: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. And we're always in a different state. And I think it's delta waves or gamma waves where we're really in a state of meditative calm. And you kind of think of like an athlete is really just calm down and they think only one focus.
Mhm.
So she did what we call a brain map. It's just an EEG of your brain, and it sees where, okay, in this frequency range, brainwave, you're a little fast, you're anxious. Well, here you're a little depressed, you're a little slow. And we want to find an even medium where we can just keep it steady state, not going to extremes. So we do a brain map. Where is it fast? Where is it slow? Okay. Now we're going to put these little electrodes on you and pulse you at these different frequencies. We do that for 15 or 20 minutes a session. So in an hour, I'm doing vagus nerve reset and neurostimulation. And I will tell you flat out, I started that on a Wednesday in January of 2020. I noticed a difference.
That's
Bam.
fascinating. I've never
It
heard of
was,
a treatment like this.
yeah. And it was, now it was immediate effect. I felt something different, but it wasn't long lasting. So it took almost a year of doing this twice a week for a long time, and then going to once a week, then to once a month. And then, okay, I haven't done it now probably in 2 years. So it
Mhm.
was 2020 to 2022, almost 2023. So a year and a half, 2 years since I've done this. And I still feel pretty darn good. So I said it started that on a Wednesday, January of 2020, but Martin Luther King Day, that Monday, I started my weight loss program with an old skipper of mine who he was 210 pounds, lost 50, 60 pounds himself, and went from running triathlons at 200 pounds to he just finished the Abbott majors, the 6 major marathons, where you have to qualify for Boston and a couple others, very, very rapid tests, rapid speeds. So I did that program, and gosh, I can't tell you how much different it was. My energy levels were up. My personality changed. I wasn't as focused on the negatives. I was ready for life. It really made a massive impact almost immediately. And about 4 months into that treatment, I decided, wow, I'm losing weight. I'm feeling better. I'm going to try running again. I've always loved running, but I hadn't done it. I always made an excuse. I'd had
Mhm.
nasty nightmares where I thought I was running for real in life, but it was really a dream, and where I just was like I was in a morass of tar, goo, or something that was holding me back. And it was for some reason in my brain, I translated that, hey, I'm going to go I can't run. I always run so slow. And my leg, it just, okay, well, let's
Mhm.
try it. And I started slowly, and I found a friend he was 60 at the time. Yeah, he's almost 64 now, who's an ultra marathon runner. And he got me into the idea of, okay, maybe you're ready to do that Marine Corps marathon.
Mhm.
And that was 2020, but it got postponed to 2020. Sorry. Yeah, it got postponed. In 2021, I put it off. I was still not quite traumatically over everything. I still had this, I can't. I still had this, you're not good enough mentality. And then in 2022, he looked at me and he said, you're doing this. I have cancer of the throat and I'm going to run it. You have no excuses. You are going to run this race. And I did. And it took, and I jumping ahead a little bit again, I took those 4 M's, the movement, mind, meditation, and meaning, and it really helped push me through both marathons. Really, the
Mhm.
second one more than the first one, to be honest with you. So if I'll just go into it, is movement to me is more important than almost anything else of what we do on our day to day, how it impacts our body. I've
Mhm.
doing a lot of research over the last 4 or 5 years. There's something that scientists have come to know as hope molecules. That every time we contract a muscle, the body secretes this hormone. They call them hope molecules that goes to our brain and makes us happy. Movement is proven to make you happy.
Yep.
And then there's a book on my shelf here, Move the Body, Heal the Mind.
I'm gonna put you on full
Um,
screen just so people can see
oh,
you.
I've got
Oh,
all
your
my
whole
books back
bookshelf right
there.
there.
By Jennifer Heiss. She's a psychologist up in Canada. And she proved, or she hasn't proven them, she showed that the body releases not just endorphins that we were all taught as children that it releases, but also, believe it or not, cannabinoids. And yes, I mean cannabinoids like cannabis. It's still a micro dose. It's nothing major. It's not going to get you high, but it contributes to that runner's high feeling. So if you move your body, even walking 15, 20 minutes a day, the health benefits are immeasurable, mental, physical, the whole 9 yards. Um, Movement, mind is kind of obvious to me because if your mind isn't right, if you have traumas, you have things that are stopping you from wanting to move ahead, you have to address those professionally. In my case, and many other cases, therapists are very helpful. Having a community that is like-minded to help focus you. My buddy who helped me run the marathons, for
Yep.
example, keeping you on track. They don't have to be, you know, this is a military thing where we had the mentor program and you had to sign up for these things. No, just it can be ad hoc. It can just be your mates who help you along and having an outlet and they understand what you're going through when you can't talk to your therapist. Okay. There's movement, there's mind. Meditation. I've always been fascinated with the Eastern philosophies, and meditation was something I'd always struggled with. What does it mean to meditate? And I learned through Gelong Tubten, The Monk's Guide to Happiness. There's a great video on YouTube. It's about 45 minutes, and he runs you through a meditative session. I think is phenomenal. And it really changed my perspective that everybody thinks you want to clear the mind, and it's really not. So it's focusing on one thing and really accepting that you can be distracted and then coming back. So his process, if I remember exactly, was think of one thing, usually the breath. And when another thought comes in, acknowledge that thought, let it go. And the fourth step is come back to the one thing you were focusing on, whether that's a breath or a flame, or, he suggests putting a candle in front of you. But it's that process: focus, distraction, release, return. Okay. And when I can't see my doctor, when I was seeing her regularly, I would meditate. And I've gotten to the point where just taking a few deep breaths slowly, what we call box breathing, is 4-second breath in, 4-second hold, 4-second release, 4-second hold. Doing that 3 or 4 times helps the vagus nerve calm down from what it was, that stressful situation that you were in. And then meaning, I kind of liken it to a 3-leaf clover. Those first 3 are the clovers, but without meaning, that stem to hold those petals together, there's no point. These are just going to fly off. The meaning is your key. Why is it? Simon Sinek calls it your why, your purpose. What is it that you're really trying to accomplish? Why do you care? What do you want to have happen in your life? Why are you doing all these things that you want to do positive in your life? For whom? For yourself? You got to think about these things. And those 4 M's really drove me through the last 3.5 years. Once I identified what they were, it was about 3.5 years ago, I realized, wow, this is a process. This is a program. This is something that I can follow if I see a degradation in one, how do I balance it? Okay, I can't run. I've had some injuries lately. I can meditate. I can calm myself, realizing that life goes on. I'm still going to be able to do something.
Exactly. Wow. So who came up with these 4 M's? Is this something that you did? So this is because you sent me even a chart and a diagram of this. And I
Yeah,
thought, wow,
I asked somebody to create that for me, a graphic artist,
oh man, let
with the
me
help
see
of a mentor.
while we're talking, and let me see if I can pull that up and I'll download it
Yeah.
and show it to the audience. Cause that was when you showed that to me, I looked at it and I thought, oh, he probably got that from I didn't understand that this was something that this whole method was something that you kind of thought through and put
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know if you remember Captain Tyre.
Uh,
He was the deputy up in
I
Manila.
do. I know. I remember. Yes.
Yeah, he lives here in Virginia Beach. Good mate. Owns an F-45 gym now here in Kings Grant area. He and I went to a pub and we were kind of talking about this. And I was like, yeah, I think this is what I'm looking at. He goes, well, yeah, it sounds great. Why don't you talk about it? I was like, why would I talk about it? I'm just a crippy. I'm just a guy who had some problems. Everybody has problems.
Sure. Sure.
And when I finally said this last key bit,
Hmm.
he really turned me into a believer of speaking out. He said, well, I looked at him and I said, well, Jeff, I'm just a crippy. I'm not a SEAL. I wasn't in
Right.
combat, shooting back at people. And he said, well, shit, Dave, that's exactly why you should. Because
I
so many
agree.
people are going through these problems
Hmm.
and they won't come forward.
No,
Please
they
talk about
won't.
it.
They
And I
won't.
said, wow, Jeff, you're right on. I'm not a SEAL. Because we always think of the combat veteran, but there's so many of us going through traumas through life, not just
Yeah.
military service.
I agree, and I think that people associate trauma with combat PTSD only,
Right.
and while combat PTSD is horrifying, and I will never do anything to minimize that type of trauma, I now recognize that even the trauma that I had in my childhood was significant. And
Yeah.
I had minimized it all my life because I did this comparative suffering game that I think we all do, where we say, "Oh, we don't have it that bad." And all that does really is bury that pain and really doesn't allow us to experience it so that and to feel it and to grieve it so that we can eventually move on. And it
Yeah.
sounds like it's so fascinating to me because I have different types of people on my show, and every person has had a different journey with their mental health. Like Greg Martin, the bipolar general, he
Love him.
he
Yep. He's a great
he's
American.
right, right. You met with him down in Florida, and but his treatment and the way that he approached bipolar is completely different uh than your protocol and the way that you have approached it. And then I'll probably talk to somebody else who's told me some other methodology. I mean, for me, it was EMDR. And that's what's so fascinating is that there really isn't one way that we move through these issues.
Yeah. Let me caveat. I mean, not all my traumas I've had. Yeah, I had childhood little T traumas that accumulated. I won't try to overstate what I
Sure.
went through in the military. Yes, I had a bad skipper. I mean, we lost 3 department heads in 3 weeks, 2 to mental health, and 1 was fired. No, I didn't I didn't have to shoot at anybody. But I will tell you that some of my big T traumas came from time in Afghanistan, Iraq. Um, I still have recurring issues with some of the things I saw and have happened to me over there. Um, it's just something that you know, we think of them as military as combat. I mean, somebody who sees an accident and sees a dead body, that's a big T trauma if you're not expecting or living in that lifestyle of being a first responder or having to deal with like police force. Joe civilian going by and seeing a dead body, that's not normal. We don't
No,
see dead bodies on a daily basis.
I would agree.
So those are traumas that we don't always acknowledge or accept or understand right off the bat. Sometimes they can linger
Hmm.
for years, decades, and then go, "Oh my god!" Like I'll give you an example. During 2020, going to my therapist, and she made a comment, and I was like, "Well, oh my!" And I started weeping. I just bawled. She goes, "Why are you weeping?" I was like, "Because of this situation I was in Afghanistan." I had totally blocked it out. I had seen. I won't even describe it here. It's not worth getting into specifics, but I had blocked it. I just would not. It was one of those doors that opened without even trying.
Right.
It was just really crazy. And she's like, "Wow, I didn't know you went through that." And I was like, "Well, I kind of forgot myself. I didn't want to talk about it." And then I
Hmm.
told my wife at the time, and it was like, "Holy crap! What the heck did I see?" It was really kind of an interesting process that I really encourage anybody to go see a therapist if they think they're dealing with something that they can't understand or grasp.
Right.
There's something deeper that you just cannot get to yourself by yourself or with your friends, and definitely not through alcohol. You know? uh,
No, no. And getting a space to deal with it and to understand it is so important, and to know that especially if it's something like a bad boss or a parent that wasn't so kind at times, to understand that those things aren't your fault. And I would say and I would never minimize a toxic work environment because I do believe that the traumatic experiences from a toxic work environment do have lingering effects if they're
yeah,
not properly dealt with or made sense of. And the understanding is there that there was things there that you could have controlled maybe, but maybe not. It's very hard with a toxic boss because with a
yeah,
toxic boss, they have the power, And it's not like a coworker or a colleague where you can resolve the differences. When there's a power differential, there's really very few options that exist if the people around the toxic boss don't see what they are doing. And that's normally what happens with a toxic boss. So the only thing that you can do is try to find a way out. That's what I have found.
No, I
Unless,
think you're right.
unless the person is breaking a law or abusing a large majority of people. But a lot of times toxic bosses stay sort of at the place where they don't go too far so that they're breaking laws or they're pissing everyone off. Usually what a
Yeah,
toxic boss does is that they're abusive only towards certain people. And
yeah.
unfortunately, if you're at the end of that abuse, the results are devastating. And so I don't want you to minimize what happened to you, because I
No,
believe it's substantial.
yeah, no, I won't. I'm just pointing out. I think in my mind that was one of those sets of things that happened in my career. It was
Mhm.
just to get to a solution, it's a culture issue. And to me, there's two aspects to this. In the world that I lived in with cryptology and intelligence, and so many of us in the Navy or the military have top secret SCI clearances. Make a major point was it's okay to get the help these days. So when I told that CEO in particular, hey boss, I'm a TAO. I've got a top secret clearance. I need to tell you that I've decided that Prozac is the right answer for me right now. And his response immediately was, does this mean you're going to walk around my ship all happy and shit now? And it was a lilting voice. His voice went up and it was just like condescending
Mhm.
attitude of, you are weak. You suck.
Shaming. Yeah, you're
Okay, well,
shaming
thanks
you.
a lot. And it was shameful. Yep. And yeah, when I attempted suicide, my clearance was taken away. I was read out. I didn't lose it. It just meant I wasn't read in. And then when I went to the National Security Agency, I was still on the Prozac, and the doc again told me, look, you need to tell your skipper. Okay, I'll tell my skipper. And I told her. Now, caveat this with I'd just been read back in a couple of days before. And I said, okay, skipper, I'm on Prozac still after this incident in Japan before I moved here. Oh, well, we need to do an investigation. We need to find out if you're worthy enough to have this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, the SSO just read me in. What's your problem? Oh, I don't agree with medicines like this. It's bad for the community. I made a decision right then and there. I'm not telling anybody until I'm asked by an official party why or what I'm doing. Like once I got into the STO-SAP world, you had to tell them. Well, all you're doing is adding to the stigma. All you're doing is making people shut down. And I'm very thankful that that was 2003, just before the war started in Iraq. I think it was 2005. Secretary Rumsfeld came out with a memo. I've got a copy of it somewhere. And said, look, unless you sought mental health therapy for, spousal abuse, physical, whatever, or for drugs or alcohol, you don't have to report mental health issues on your SF-86, the clearance form. And I said, wow, that's a great, great idea. And I'm happy to see that over the last few years, we're starting to see a culture shift where we can come forward and talk about mental health openly and not at risk of losing your clearance.
I agree. I
You know,
mean, when I went and sought treatment this past summer, I received no blowback, no issues, no nothing over this treatment, and over subsequently being diagnosed with complex PTSD and also anxiety. Not a I mean, I'm still in an overseas billet, I'm still
yeah,
traveling, I'm still doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing as a public affairs officer in a very challenging, overseas NATO assignment. So, I am, like you, very happy to see that mental health is much more talked about, it's more highly regarded. I think the part that we still struggle with are the heart-centered, conversations with people and the taking care of one another within the work center, because it does take a different skill, and I know this as a boss, to be task orientated versus being people orientated. And you really have to take off your task hat and be a human and get to know people, check in with them, ask how they're doing, do the social events, don't just do the
Yeah.
work stuff. Otherwise, you won't build a team that feels more connected to you or the mission. And I think that's
Um,
one of the things that the military is suffering from is the fact that we have become so task and mission orientated because we are in many of our job specialties, we're severely undermanned and under resourced, and that causes a lot of stress. And people who are stressed do things that they wouldn't normally do. And I think that until we can get our manning and our resource levels to a point where the work is manageable, then people are still going to feel as though they're not being taken care of. And I think that
yeah.
this kind of conversation we're having today is a step in that direction.
Yeah, I would just caution, one thing I've seen in the last 5 years, I think really is a just caution folks on the overuse of terms. Overuse of, oh, I'm traumatized. Oh, that gives me PTSD. Oh, that I'm depressed. Well, look, sometimes we just need a change of pace. We just need a different scenery for just a couple
Mhm.
of days and we can come out of whatever low we're in. I was thinking about this afternoon before we got on here. It really frustrated me it was about a year ago. I don't watch American football very much. I usually do if it's college football. And Kirk Herbstreit, there was just this massive hit on a quarterback. And Kirk Herbstreit, oh my God, that gives me PTSD. Dude, you're minimizing what it is to have PTSD. It doesn't give you
Mhm.
PTSD to see it. It's giving you memories of what happened to you, but that's not giving you PTSD. And so many people go, "Oh, this gives me PTSD." No, it doesn't. The situation doesn't give you PTSD. It's triggering memories. And
Mhm.
even the trigger word, I think it's overused.
It
I wish
is.
we could find another term for it. But it is what it is where we are with it right now. So we have to find a balance as leaders to say, look, yes, there's a task that we need to get through. I don't want to
Yes.
over swing it to everything is going to be about trauma and everything is going to be about,
Everybody needs a mental health day and everyone
yeah.
needs, yeah, I agree. It
And
is a
finding
balance.
that balance is the key. Somewhere in the middle, we can say, look, I've got tasks that need to get done and I'm going to take care of you, but don't oversell your
Yeah,
negative feelings on this. Be
right.
realistic with what's going on. It's kind of where I'm going with Kirk Herbstreit comparison there.
Mhm. And I think that that's also part of why leaders need to also be doers.
Yeah.
The best leaders know how long tasks take. They've done those tasks themselves at one time or another, and they are realistic with what they give people, and they know too when they themselves needed a break and when they themselves needed to push, to lean back or when to lean forward. And so I think that that is a big part of how we build those healthy, strong, winning teams. And I I just love you've created this thing with the movement, the mind. What were the other two M's? Movement, mind,
Meditation and meaning.
meditation, and meaning. So that was what I was going to ask you about was the meaning side. Did you know when you started on this journey, this most recent time before you did the marathons, that meaning sort of was the driver? I still understand what you were saying about the four leaf clover with the meaning being kind of in the middle. And if you did believe that that was the driver, did you know what your meaning was going to be when you started?
No. The short answer is no. So meaning came out of why.
Mhm.
And when I started that weight loss program, it's really, I really hate calling it a diet program. It's really a lifestyle program change in how I approach food. Um, Bob Ford, Captain Bob Ford, he's down in Georgia. He got me into it. Um, and one of the first questions they ask you is, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? Why do you want to lose weight? What are you doing for this for beyond the aesthetics and your
Mhm.
health? What's your real purpose in life? And I said, okay, wow, it's It's really a great question. And mine came down to setting a good example physically and mentally for my daughter to say, look, what dad went through, you don't have to go through. And here's how I have changed my approaches to live a better life and be a better father. And that manifested itself in the working out, the meditation, and making sure that I got the help for my mind when I needed it. Hey, look, just over Christmas, I found myself in another low. January, I went and saw my primary care manager and said, I need to see another therapist again. I happened to go back to the one I saw 4 years ago. Great. There's times where you need to take care of the mind. Like I said, you need to talk to somebody outside of your little circle of friends and colleagues. Meaning, really, for me, is about setting the right example for my daughter primarily. And as I've gone through time in the last 3 or 4 years, it's been, look, if I can do this, I don't want to say anybody can do it, but it's possible. Let's find a way to make sure that everybody has a path beyond their traumas. And
Yeah.
that's really important. And like I said, Jeff helping me share my story and say, look, everybody goes through this. It's not the SEALs, it's not the Marines and the soldiers who are in combat, it's everybody.
Mm-hmm. That has helped me too, as well. We've also had a few visitors here and there, and I do apologize. I haven't really gotten to a lot of the comments.
Fine.
We talked to Ambassador Terry Earthwind, mentor to current and future world leaders, said is talking about a lot of the therapy approaches are Band-Aid therapy, and I would agree. And that's what we were talking about earlier. And then Tab Bartley is also on the call, and she just was talking about I don't like to oversell the negative. And yeah, we discussed that earlier. And she said as well, being better for our children is so impactful. And I do agree that's such a wonderful driver to do is that idea of being better. But to your point earlier, I do believe that understanding that we are not alone was really helpful for me. It was one of the reasons why in a previous healing journey I was on, I went to a lot of the Alcoholics Anonymous and some of the other anonymous groups because I felt as though when I was listening to those shares, I was hearing things for the first time that nobody was ever talking about at work. And it really had a deep impact on me because there just weren't people that I knew who were talking about these things. Now we have all these podcasts and other things, but back then, this was in 2016 to 18, I want to say. No, even before then, it was more like 14 to 16. We just didn't have language that around these kinds of things, and so I wasn't around people that would go that deep into what was really bothering them, and so I had no idea. And then understanding, like, wait a minute, this is stuff that everybody deals with, not just me. And
Again, it's getting beyond your circle of friends. You've got to understand that there's more out there. You can get into an echo chamber very quickly of, oh, Dave's okay, Teresa's okay, don't worry about it, you're fine. And it's just in this little circle of people that, oh, it's external to you. It's nothing that you need to worry about. You're fine. Well, sometimes there's something wrong.
right.
Having an understanding that other people go through these things is fine. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that.
And it really helped me because I saw like the whole spectrum of people, especially in a relationship support group that I was in. I saw people that had gone through horrific child abuse, and then I had people who had much more. I would maybe call them little T's or whatever, or other things, but they were like what happened, I think, with you and I, which were these things that just kept building up, and we just kept not dealing with them and
Yeah.
burying them and numbing with other things, and that just makes it worse. And then I found with myself, I don't know if this was like this for you, Dave, but I was subconsciously playing out patterns with coworkers and friends and relationship dynamics that were from my childhood and not
Yeah.
even realizing I was doing it.
No, I did too. And I think I finally found the triggers to break those
Right.
patterns.
Me too. I can recognize even now because it doesn't, I don't think it ever goes away. That is another point is that
Yeah.
I think that if you've had trauma in your life, you're going to have triggers, and these things are going to continue to come up. But what has really helped me is that I can recognize earlier in the cycle when a certain interaction or a dynamic is playing out, and I can put a stop to it sooner than later. I
Yeah.
won't let it linger for 2 or 3 days and be pissed off about it and talk nonstop to my husband over
Yeah.
it. Instead, I'll handle the situation and I'll take ownership of it. And it's such an amazing feeling. Like, and then I go for a walk with Harry and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I've resolved that conflict because
Yeah.
I've taken charge. I've owned the issue and I've taken and I've stopped it from becoming a big T."
Yeah. So what I try to do is I recognize that, look, things are going to build and there's going to be pressure, and I'm going to be angrier at myself mostly. Wow, I wish I'd said that in this meeting. I wish I'd done this for whatever client or for whoever friend, and things just kind of blow up and build up, and then finally I just release it. Usually through a run where I'm thinking it through, and then I go, I can't worry about it. And as I tell my daughter all the time now, oh, this happened in school. Can you do anything to change it? No, it's in
So
the past.
true. So
Stop
true.
living in the past. There's a great image I just saw today, or maybe yesterday. It's a guy with some balloons, and his future is listed on the balloons, and he's going up, but he's hanging on to the past with this big, weight. And it says at the bottom, "Let go of the weight
Yeah.
and see your future." Okay, well, if I drop that, then I can go, I can soar. I can't worry about anymore what happened in the past. Like, I haven't spoken to my real mother in 29 years,
Mhm.
and I refuse to. Uh, it doesn't do me any good to worry about it anymore,
Mm-mm.
to wonder where she is, to wonder what she's up to. All it's going to bring me in my mind is negativity. So why would I want to go there?
Right.
And by dwelling on things that happened in the past, the traumas that she inflicted, I won't get into details. It doesn't do me any good.
No.
Just
I
just
had
move on.
I had a similar epiphany about the fact that I think that because of my podcast and how open I am on social media, I'm getting to a place where some of my friends are dropping out off, or some of the people who I thought were my friends,
Yeah,
and it's interesting though, but I can't control it. And I'm going where I'm going to go. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe it's the future of communications. I believe
yeah,
that one day general officers and flag officers and Congress people are going to be doing long form podcasts. I think they're going to be getting on their phones just like President Zelensky is in Ukraine, because when shit hits the fan, that's when things get real and you become the kind of communicator that you have to become for the moment. And
yeah,
this is all going to happen anyway. We're just not there yet. And so I can't, I, I, I'm not even really I feel bad for them because it's
yeah,
like, oh, it's too bad I can't talk to this person as much anymore, or it maybe not going to have the same kind of friendship I used to have with them. But I'm not that same person anymore where I'm not afraid to speak up and to speak out and to be myself and to be the same person on this podcast that you see in person. And so, like you said, I can relate to exactly what you just said. I just had to drop that and say, well, I'll have new friends now.
here's the problem. You said it yourself, is you're not the same person.
Mhm.
And that shows a strength and a purpose and a drive to change, which makes, the whole idea of a crab or a locust, or they break their shell and they grow into a new one. They're
Mhm.
evolving, they're changing. And what it sounds to me like is when friends say, well, I can't deal with who you are now, well, then you haven't changed. That's your problem. You haven't evolved. You haven't changed and come to a new realization that the world is different. Whereas I've decided that that's weighing me down too much. I'm not going to live like that.
Right. Absolutely.
And when we can shed, I'll say, shed the shit,
Right. Let it
then
go.
where's the problem?
Well, and I came to a really great insight the other day, as I was allowing myself once again to get stressed by too many requirements and not enough people and resources at work. I realized that every time I allow myself to get stressed or to get anxious, all I'm doing is giving my power away. And that was like really like a really aha moment for me. And I thought, I can't control the fact that I'm being given too many tasks and not enough people. All I can do is prioritize the best I know how. And the things that we can't get to, I just have to let it go and apologize to those people and let them do it on their own with some self-help
Yeah.
coaching. I mean, because that's all we can do. In my business, there's no it's a limitless stream of things that people want out of you because communications is very subjective and you have to prioritize and you have to say what you will work on, what you will make your priority and what you cannot get to. So it is definitely a learning experience, growing and changing. And I think that's also the wonderful nature of life. That's probably the best part of aging, not the health problems
No.
or the things that become harder, you get slower, but I would say the wisdom and the fact that you can continue to evolve is one of the most beautiful parts of getting older.
Yeah. Yep. I can't, there's nothing to add to that. That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just recently was, following I follow Pamela Anderson, and probably people like, "Oh my god, Pamela Anderson," but if you guys have been seeing what she's been doing lately, it's phenomenal. I mean, she is just living her best life. She wears no makeup, she's just out there on her farm, just doing all these kinds of very natural and homeopathic kind of things to heal. And when I see her, I mean, she's like inspiring me to like not wear makeup and to be me and everything. And like and she's, 56, I think. And so it's just nice to see that there are people out there who are living their best lives at an older age. And Tab Bartlett says, yeah, me too. She really is. Yes. I really encourage you guys to check her out. Like, she's not just this like blonde bimbo, whatever people thought she was, married to Tommy Lee, and she writes poetry. I'm on her email list, and
Hmm.
I get all her writings, and it's just she's fascinating. She's an artist, and it's wonderful to find that. And I guess that would be my next question. As we close out the call, is who have been your mentors and people that have helped you along in this journey, and how?
Um, well, number one, and it's going to sound very trite, is my dad.
Hmm.
Um, his ability to, I told you before the show, I shared with you several years ago, I wrote an essay, I'm Not Mental Illness Ashamed, MIA. And he said, "Hey, Dave, this is great stuff. I never knew some of these things. And why don't you share this story? Why don't you talk to people about this?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not ready to do that yet." And this was 6 years ago almost now. Okay, well, some of the things that he's done in his life, moving on from my mother and where we are today together as a father son, he's really been a big proponent of me talking about the things and helping others. My friend Joe is a big proponent for me to keep moving.
He's the one that did the marathon
He's the one
with
who did the
you.
marathons with me. Even with a huge tumor in his neck, he made it through 20 miles, but then he let me go, and that's where the 4Ms had to come in. And the second marathon was really the more struggling because it was 20 degrees warmer at start and finish, and I was just dehydrated very quickly, but had to rely on those 4Ms to get me through. Those are the two biggest ones right now. But even more trite than my dad probably is I watched my daughter growing up has been the most exciting thing, and making sure that I stay focused on being healthy and
Yep.
there for her. I mean, I know for a fact, no matter how many suicidal ideations I've had in the last 6 years, and I've had them, I'm not going to lie, I know I will never attempt again because I will not do that to my daughter. I just will not do that to her. I think that's, I remember my dad, I know we're coming to the end. I'm sorry.
No,
When I
no, go
attempted
ahead.
back
We can
in
always do over.
2002, I went home for Christmas. I came home from Japan, went to Florida and spent Christmas with my dad. And he told me suicide is the most cowardly thing I could ever think of somebody doing. And I said, F you. And he said, "Oh yeah, shit, I forgot you tried." And I just knew that if I'd done something like that and he'd lost me, And then having seen a friend of mine be killed in an air show accident and watching his mom having lost him, I can't do that to somebody
Right.
intentionally. I will not do that to somebody. My daughter is the primary reason.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I always think it's like what do they say? It's a temporary solution to it's just it's not
Long-term solution to a short-term problem.
a long-term solution to a short-term problem. Yeah. It's one of those things where my heart goes out to anyone that even gets to a point where they're close to thinking about that, because it just shows me that they've given up. Like, every other option out there isn't going to work. And
Well, I've always told people, and any listener or anybody who watches this, they can reach out to me anytime. I don't care if it's 2 in the morning. I would rather listen to you talk and tell me what's wrong than you do the unthinkable.
and there are always people that will support you. I know this because, like I said, when I was in my lowest of the lows, had nobody to turn to that I felt safe enough to share at my work. And I was single and I didn't have any real friends because I kept moving from duty station to duty station. I found support in those 12-step groups. And that was my savior. I made friends through it. And a lot of those times they would do the meetings, and then after the meetings everybody would meet at a coffee shop or something afterwards, and it was really helpful to get to know these people. And I would meet people from all walks of life, and people that were artists and people that were in totally different industries, and it was just very important for me to see that there were people that were struggling with things that were so horrifying, and they were still finding ways to stay positive and to move forward and to
Yeah.
help and share their story. And that really made a big impact on me. Is there anything else that you just want to add before we close out the call?
Yeah, you just had me thinking. And one last thing I would say is comparison is the root of biggest problems. Is don't compare yourself to other people's traumas. Don't compare yourself to other people's lives and where they are, because it's not their life. It's not your life. It's you need to live yours, not theirs. And if
Absolutely.
you stop comparing yourself to other people, you'll be much happier. And again, if someone has a question, they're happy. I'm happy to hear from them and reach out to me. If they're having problems, they can reach out to me. Again, I'd rather listen to problems than read about obituaries.
I agree. I 100% agree. Well, Dave, this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I will meet you backstage as I go full screen, but I'm sure that all of our listeners got a lot out of this broadcast. I know I did, and thank you again.
Thank you for having me, Teresa. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I will have another podcast this Thursday. I'm going to be having, I believe it's Corey Weathers. She wrote the book, The Culture Shift, which is a very deep dive examination of the culture issues that we've seen in the military, stemming from post 9/11 all the way to today. And I'm sure it's going to be a fascinating conversation. She's I believe, a licensed professional counselor. And so I can't wait to hear her insights and to share them with all of you. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care now. Bye bye, and have a wonderful day.